actually say that this is black privilege, to be totally honest with you, because her posting this white racist comment right after assaulting Sophie Cunningham on the court is actually black privilege, because she knows the WNBA won't do a single thing of significance about it. And imagine if the roles were reversed. If Sophie made a comment similar to this, then she'd likely never play again. And actually, we just saw this from Coach Sandy Brondello. She got disciplined for making, I believe, a pretty innocent, maybe, offhand comment about talking about Angel Reese and saying that she's a protected species. She was suspended and disciplined. And I think if that's the standard, then DiJonai should.
What happens when the people paid to analyze the WNBA suddenly start sounding like defense attorneys? That is exactly what has fans raising their eyebrows after the DiJonai Carrington and Sophie Cunningham incident. Instead of simply condemning the ugly moment, some analysts appear determined to explain it away, and that has opened an entirely different controversy. Because once the cameras stopped rolling, the biggest question was no longer what happened, but why so many people seem desperate to defend it.
These are plays we've seen from DiJonai, right? So getting in the right position, jumping over the top, getting these transition blocks. She's always going to make that effort. So even for some of these, she's behind the offensive player coming over the top. So again, she was behind Sophie Cunningham. She wasn't able to get over the top. Had she got over the top and made that play, we wouldn't have been talking about it. She was too far behind the play. The contact above the head was too much. But that's what DiJonai Carrington does. This wasn't because it was Sophie Cunningham making the layup.
Sometimes the strangest part of a controversy isn't the incident itself, but who chooses to stand up and defend it. And in this case, the person doing the defending wasn't a teammate, an agent, or even a random fan lost in the algorithm.
Told you Sophie Cunningham was going to be the next target. I've been telling you guys for weeks. Sophie would take the role of Caitlin Clark as public enemy number 1 in the WNBA dump. And yesterday was the first attack. I wasn't able to predict this because I'm some brilliant scholar or philosopher. This prediction was not delivered to me in a dream or a vision that came from the dearly departed Miss Cleo.
It was the head coach of the team that had just watched one of its own players get clotheslined to the floor. Stephanie White walked up to that podium, faced a room full of reporters who had just watched Sophie Cunningham get hammered across the head. And instead of standing firmly behind her own player, she offered up a version of events that seemed to soften what everyone else had just witnessed with their own eyes.
Man, some of y'all are racist and you need to just come out and say it. I cannot believe what I just watched on this WNBA countdown panel. I see why nobody's watching it. I see why the ratings stink. I see why when they post clips of you guys on YouTube, the views are trash. They're absolute trash. We got Monica McNutcase, Andrea. This is one of the most ridiculous things I've seen. They sat here and tried to make excuses for DiJonai Carrington and try to make it seem like what she did was okay.
That single decision turned a bad foul into a full-blown story about whether the WNBA actually protects the players it claims to care about. To understand why this moment hit such a nerve, you have to rewind to the collision itself.
It's kind of amazing it hadn't come up before now. But Sophie Cunningham, of course, as usual, responding and not taking it lying down, responded to all of this, saying, I think the league is taking care of that, meaning the foul. And this has nothing to do with race. Last year, I did the same thing, and I got kicked out of a game, and I deserved to be kicked out. There's no reason even to play that card, meaning the race card. Clearly, I think it was unnecessary. I don't even know her. She wasn't even on the team last year when all that was going on. But
Sophie Cunningham was pushing the ball up the floor, doing exactly what she's built her reputation on, playing fast, playing physical, and refusing to back down from contact. DiJonai Carrington met her not with a contest at the rim, not with a hand up, not with anything resembling a basketball play, but with an arm that came across Cunningham's head and neck like something out of a professional wrestling highlight reel. Cunningham hit the floor. The official stopped play immediately, went to the monitor, reviewed the contact frame by frame, and made the only reasonable conclusion available to them. What started as a common foul on the floor became a flagrant 2, and DiJonai Carrington was ejected from the game on the spot. Now, under normal circumstances, that would have been the end of it. A seriousness of putting another player's neck and head at risk. She posted 2 words that instantly reframed the entire incident. white privilege. No further explanation, no context, just a direct implication that Cunningham's flagrant foul call, upgraded by officials who reviewed actual video evidence, was somehow rooted in race rather than in the fact that she had just clotheslined a player in front of a national television audience.
Now, this is a very serious conversation to have, and I didn't talk about it yesterday because when I made that video, I didn't even know that DiJonai had posted on Threads. But right after DiJonai got ejected from the game, as you know by now, she went and wrote white privilege on Threads. And she added the Indiana Fever, saying that the reason she was thrown out of the game was because of white privilege. And if you're totally uncaught up on this situation, look at this. She totally goes for Sophie Cunningham's neck here and sends her to the floor. Sophie Cunningham immediately gets up and is ready to fight, and DiJonai gets up also ready to fight. Very important that DiJonai does not ever, in any point of this, try to go to Sophie Cunningham and say, I'm sorry.
That post did exactly what posts like that always do on the internet. It didn't calm anything down. It poured gasoline directly onto a fire that was already burning hot enough on its own. Within the hour, clips of the foul were being placed side by side with screenshots of the tweet, and suddenly, the conversation wasn't just about whether the ejection was correct. It became a referendum on whether Carrington was using a serious accusation as a shield to avoid accountability for a genuinely dangerous play. And that's where things get followed from people who should have known better. Analysts, commentators, and various voices within the basketball media ecosystem lined up to either downplay the severity of the foul or to entertain the idea that Carrington's accusation deserved serious consideration. Watching grown professionals search for ways to justify a clothesline to the head as anything other than reckless and dangerous was genuinely baffling to a huge portion of the audience watching at home. This wasn't a marginal, borderline, he said, she said kind of play where reasonable people could look at the same replay and land in different places. The officials reviewed it, they upgraded it. The video is not ambiguous. And yet there were still analysts willing to twist themselves into rhetorical pretzels, trying to find nuance in a play that had none.
And WNBA Countdown is their version of The View. We knew they were going to defend DiJonai Carrington. We knew they were going to make light of the situation. We knew they were going to say, oh, is this really a flagrant foul? It's on the edge. I don't know. We knew it. The WNBA Countdown crew getting absolutely destroyed for their comments today. Absolutely destroyed for their comments.
That's exactly why so many fans reached the boiling point and started calling for something much stronger than a single game ejection. Some wanted a lengthy suspension. Others wanted Carrington removed from the league entirely, arguing that a pattern was forming that the WNBA could no longer afford to ignore. Because here's the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath all of this noise. Dangerous fouls keep happening in this league, and the punishments rarely seem to match the severity of the act. Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham seem to find themselves at the center of these storms over and over again, whether it's a hard screen, a shove after the whistle, or now a clothesline that sends a player crashing to the floor. Every time one of these plays happens, it reignites the exact same argument. Is the league doing enough to protect its most visible players? Or has physical play against Clark and her teammates become something that certain opponents feel emboldened to escalate because the disciplinary consequences never seem to catch up with the severity of what's happening on the floor? That question isn't going away anytime soon, and every new incident just adds another log to a fire that's already burning out of control.
And this bozo of a coach is defending her instead of holding down her own team. This is why this goofball needs to be freaking fired immediately. She's a clown.
I don't oppose the hard foul, but I also don't think that she intentionally went for the neck.
Why are you defending DiJonai Carrington? Beyond that, we know you're a bozo. Let's get to this goofball panel.
DiJonai didn't make this play successfully, right? Trying to get a block over the top. It was a very hard foul. DiJonai has made this play successfully so many times.
What makes Carrington's situation even messier is that this wasn't her first rodeo when it comes to controversy involving Indiana players. She was already connected to a widely discussed incident from the previous year involving contact near Clark's eye. A moment that plenty of people believed crossed a line even back then. So when this new incident happened, it wasn't judged in a vacuum. Fans and analysts immediately started connecting the dots, pulling up old clips, referencing past confrontations, and building a narrative around a player who seems to keep finding herself at the center of exactly this kind of physical controversy. Once that pattern starts to form, every new incident gets viewed through a much harsher lens. Fair or not, because history has a way of following players around in a league where every game gets clipped, replayed, and dissected from a dozen different camera angles. Meanwhile, the person who actually absorbed the hit handled the entire situation with a level head that almost felt out of place given how chaotic everything around her had become. Sophie Cunningham didn't demand a lifetime ban. She didn't call for Carrington's career to be ended. She simply said what most reasonable observers watching the replay already believed, that the foul was unnecessary and appeared intentional. Then, in a moment of self-awareness that honestly deserves more credit than it received, she pointed out that she herself had been ejected for a similar play in the past, and believed that ejection was justified too.
As I am watching the reactions on social media yesterday of DiJonai Carrington assaulting Sophie Cunningham, and that's what this was, assault. This was not incidental contact in the rhythm of a basketball game, mainly because the WNBA is not a basketball league. What you saw yesterday, that was intentional assault. And like I said, it was easy to predict as I'm watching the reactions on social media.
In other words, Cunningham wasn't asking for special treatment or extra punishment. She was simply asking the league to treat dangerous plays consistently, regardless of who's on the receiving end or who's throwing the punch, so to speak. That kind of composed response should have been the story. Instead, the loudest part of this saga became the online battle over Carrington's white privilege claim. And that's a genuine shame, because it distracted from the more important conversation the league actually needs to be having. Why do these dangerous, reckless fouls keep happening at the rate they do? Why does it feel like there's a revolving door of incidents involving hard, borderline dangerous contact, followed by minimal consequences, followed by outrage, followed by silence until the next one happens? The WNBA has never had more eyes on it than it does right now, and that increased attention should be pushing the league toward tighter officiating standards and more consistent discipline. Instead, incidents like this one make it look like the opposite is happening, like the scrutiny is exposing gaps in the system rather than encouraging the league to close them. And that's really the uncomfortable core of this entire story. It's not just about one clothesline, one ejection, or one poorly worded tweet. It's about a league that seems to be functioning without a consistent standard for what constitutes an unacceptable level of physicality on the court. When a flagrant 2 foul happens and gets confirmed by video review, that should be the end of the debate about whether the contact was excessive.
So in yesterday's game, Sophie Cunningham gets clotheslined across the head. And for some reason, somehow, it's racist. Make it make sense, guys. So, Carrington comes in, you know, she's a shit starter, comes in, huge hard foul on Sophie Cunningham, tries to take her head off. She gets...
The debate that should follow is about what happens next, whether a single ejection is a sufficient deterrent, or whether the league needs to start attaching real financial and game-time consequences to plays that put another player's health directly at risk. Right now, based on the pattern fans keep pointing to, it doesn't feel like those consequences exist in any meaningful way. And that vacuum is exactly what allows moments like this one to keep repeating themselves season after season. Stephanie White wasn't required to throw Carrington under the bus, but her choice to suggest that the intent wasn't there, despite video evidence that told a very different story, sent a message that landed poorly with a fan base already sensitive to how these incidents get handled. When even the people whose job it is to advocate for player safety start offering cover for plays like this, it becomes a lot harder to trust that the league's internal culture actually prioritizes protecting its players the way it claims to. So where does this leave things moving forward? The ejection has already happened. The flagrant 2 are already on the books. The tweet is already out there, screenshotted 1,000 times over, impossible to take back. What remains is the decision the league still has to make about additional discipline. And that decision is going to say a lot about where the WNBA actually stands on moments like this.
So this is actually mad. According to the rulebook, an ejected player or coach must immediately go to the locker room or leave the building. However, because league policy prohibits players from using personal electronic device or posting online until all post-game media obligations are fulfilled, they cannot use their phones while waiting in the locker room. is there. I have to view post engagements. Like, she not only, like, she tweeted plenty of times.
If Carrington receives nothing beyond the ejection, expect the frustration among fans to grow even louder, and expect this exact same argument to resurface the very next time a similarly dangerous play goes unpunished. If the league does step in with something stronger, it might, just might, signal that enough is finally enough. But if history has taught us anything about this exact situation, it's that the outrage tends to fade a lot faster than the underlying problem does. The clips get buried under new clips, the arguments get replaced by newer arguments, and somewhere down the line, another hard foul happens, another player goes down awkwardly, and the entire cycle starts right back up again. Until the WNBA decides to draw a real, consistent line on what crosses from physical basketball into reckless endangerment, moments like this one aren't going away. They're simply going to keep finding new players, new games, and new headlines to attach themselves to. They're simply going to keep finding new players, new games, and new headlines to attach themselves to, while the league keeps hoping the storm passes before anyone asks too many uncomfortable questions about why it keeps happening in the first place.
Ready to go. Took no ownership, no accountability, and that's what I want to talk about today. DiJonai Carrington is making a spectacle of herself. She is embarrassing herself for the whole world to see right now. And this, my friends, is what happens when you refuse to take accountability. This is why victim mentality in our culture is such a big deal. Instead of owning up your mistakes, instead of noticing where you went wrong, we always deflect. We always say, well, yes, I was wrong, but let's not focus on that. What about everything you did? Instead of looking within, we look towards others and we say, yeah, I hit her on the neck, but it should have been just a flagrant one. Obviously, I didn't intend it.
And that's really the trap the WNBA has built for itself without even realizing it. Every time a controversy like this blows up online, the league gets a short-term spike in attention, more eyes on the product, more casual fans suddenly paying attention to a sport they weren't watching a week earlier. That means every inconsistency gets magnified, every soft response from a coach gets dissected, and every questionable non-call becomes evidence in an ongoing argument about whether the league actually has control over its own product. So the real story here was never just about one clothesline or one accusation of racism thrown out in the heat of the moment. It's about whether the WNBA can build a disciplinary system strong enough to match the size of the audience now watching its every move. Because right now, based on how this entire situation played out, it doesn't look like that system exists yet.